I never imagined that the sound of a car engine in my driveway would bring me to my knees. But there I was, 83 years old, clutching the kitchen counter, watching through the window as my husband stepped out of a vehicle I didn't recognize, with a woman half his age holding a little boy's hand. 3 years. 3 years he'd been gone. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I've lived in this house for 56 years. I raised 3 children here. I buried my youngest son here, in the small cemetery just beyond the willow tree he used to climb. I watched my daughters grow, marry, and move to opposite sides of the country. And I waited. God knows I waited for Thomas to come home. When he left, he said he needed time. Time to think. Time to find himself. At 80 years old, my husband told me he needed to find himself, as if he'd been lost all those decades we'd spent together. He kissed my forehead, packed 2 suitcases, and drove away in our old pickup truck on a Tuesday morning in March. I called his sister. She said she hadn't heard from him. I called our daughters. Rebecca cried on the phone. Linda got angry and said she'd always known her father was selfish, but neither of them came home. They had their own lives, their own families, their own problems, so I waited alone. I kept his coffee mug on the counter. I left his reading glasses on the nightstand. I watered the tomato plants in the garden because Thomas always said they were finicky and needed a gentle hand. Every Sunday, I set 2 places at the table, even though I ate alone. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly means more than you can imagine. The neighbors stopped asking after the first year. Mrs. Chen from across the street would wave but never come closer. The mailman left packages on the porch without knocking. I became the old woman who lived alone in the house with the overgrown hedges and the paint peeling from the shutters. But I never stopped believing he'd come back. Until that moment. That Tuesday afternoon in June when I saw him step out of that car with her. She was young. Not young like a daughter, but young enough to make my stomach turn. She wore a yellow sundress and had long, dark hair that caught the sunlight. The little boy couldn't have been more than 4 years old. He had Thomas's eyes. Even from the window, I could see it. Those same gray-blue eyes that had looked at me across the breakfast table for over 6 decades. My hands started shaking. The glass of water I'd been holding slipped and shattered on the floor. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching as Thomas took the woman's hand and walked toward my front door. Our front door. I heard the knock. 3 soft taps, as if he were a stranger asking for directions. But what happened when I opened that door changed everything. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as I walked to the door. Each step echoed in the empty house. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and shallow. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see their silhouettes waiting. I smoothed down my apron. It was ridiculous, I know. But after all those years of marriage, some habits die hard. I wanted to look presentable for my husband. When I opened the door, Thomas looked older. His hair had gone completely white. He'd lost weight. There were new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. But he was still Thomas. Still the man I'd married when I was 22 years old and believed in forever. "Hello, Margaret," he said softly. The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably. Up close, I could see she was probably in her early 40s. She had kind eyes, which somehow made it worse. The little boy hid behind her legs, peeking out at me with those familiar gray-blue eyes. We need to talk," Thomas continued. I should have slammed the door. I should have screamed. I should have done any number of things that a stronger woman might have done. Instead, I stepped aside and let them into my home. They sat on my couch, the same couch where Thomas and I used to watch the evening news, the same couch where we'd held our grandchildren. The woman, I still didn't know her name, kept her hand on the little boy's shoulder protectively. "This is Caroline," Thomas finally said. "And this is William. He's my son." The words hung in the air like smoke. His son, not our son. His son. I didn't plan for this to happen. "Margaret," he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "I met Caroline at a diner in Nevada. I was lost. You have to understand, I was lost. Lost. That word again. Caroline spoke for the first time. Her voice was gentle, apologetic. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm so sorry. I didn't know Thomas was married when we met. He told me his wife had passed away years ago." I looked at Thomas then, really looked at him, and I saw something I'd never seen before in all our years together. Shame. Deep, suffocating shame. You told her I was dead? My voice came out as a whisper. He couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't know how to explain. I didn't know how to tell her about us, about the life I'd left behind. So I made up a story. The little boy, William, started to cry softly. The sound cut through me like a knife. He was innocent in all of this. A child who didn't understand why his grandmother was looking at him like he'd broken her heart just by existing. "Why are you here?" I asked. "After 3 years, why come back now?" Thomas took a deep breath. "Because Caroline is dying." The room tilted. I gripped the armrest of my chair to steady myself. "Pancreatic cancer," Caroline said quietly, her hand still resting on William's small shoulder. "Stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less." I looked at her again, this time searching for signs of illness. She was thin, yes, but she held herself with a strange dignity. Her skin had a slight pallor I hadn't noticed before. The yellow sundress suddenly seemed like armor, a bright disguise covering something dark underneath. William needs a home," Thomas said. "He needs family. Caroline's parents are gone. She has a sister in Oregon, but she's not well herself. Margaret, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what I've done is unforgivable. You're asking me to take him." The words felt foreign in my mouth. "You abandoned me for 3 years, built a life with another woman, had a child, and now you want me to raise him when she's gone." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "I wouldn't ask this if there was any other way. But Thomas is his father. And despite everything, despite the lies he told me, I believe he's a good man who made terrible mistakes. William deserves to know his father. He deserves a family. What about his daughters?" I looked at Thomas. "Rebecca and Linda. They're his family too." Thomas's face darkened. I tried calling them. When I found out about Caroline's diagnosis, Rebecca hung up on me. Linda told me I was dead to her, that she hoped I'd rot in hell for what I did to you. A part of me wanted to feel vindicated by that. My daughters had stood by me, had taken my side. But another part, the part that had spent 56 years being a mother, understood the complexity of what Thomas was asking. William had stopped crying. He was looking at me now with those gray-blue eyes. Thomas's eyes. My husband's eyes. And suddenly, I saw something else in them. I saw my son, James, who died at 17 in a car accident. James had those same eyes. That same serious expression when he was trying to understand the adult world around him. "How long have you known?" I asked Caroline. 8 months. I started feeling sick about a year ago. By the time they found it, it had already spread. "And you're here because I'm running out of time to make arrangements," she said simply. "Because William deserves better than foster care. Because despite everything, I believe you're a good woman, Mrs. Sullivan. Thomas talks about you sometimes, when he thinks I'm asleep. He talks about the life you had together, the home you built. He talks about it with regret." I looked at Thomas. "Is that true?" He nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Not a day went by that I didn't regret leaving, Margaret. Then why didn't you come back?" The question had been lodged in my throat for 3 years, and now it finally broke free. "Why didn't you just come home?" Thomas wiped his face with the back of his hand. Pride, shame, fear. By the time I realized what I'd lost, I'd already met Caroline. She was pregnant. I thought maybe this was my second chance. A chance to be a better man, a better father than I'd been the first time around. "You were a good father," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, Thomas had loved our children. He'd worked 2 jobs to put them through college. He'd walked both daughters down the aisle. He'd sat with me through endless nights at the hospital when James was dying. "Not good enough, apparently," he said bitterly. "Rebecca won't speak to me. Linda wishes I was dead. And you," he looked at me with such raw pain that I had to look away. "You deserved so much better than what I gave you." William tugged on Caroline's sleeve. "Mama, I'm hungry," he whispered. Caroline glanced at me apologetically. "We drove straight through from Nevada. We haven't eaten since breakfast." I stood up automatically, the hostess in me overriding everything else. "I have soup on the stove, and some fresh bread from this morning." Mrs. Sullivan, You don't have to. It's Margaret, I interrupted, and the child is hungry. In the kitchen, I ladled out chicken soup while Caroline helped William wash his hands at the sink. Thomas stood awkwardly in the doorway, as if he no longer knew his place in this house. And perhaps he didn't. Perhaps none of us knew our places anymore. William ate with the focused intensity of a 4-year-old who'd missed lunch. Caroline ate slowly, carefully, and I recognized the movements of someone for whom eating had become difficult. Thomas barely touched his food. "This is good," William said suddenly, looking up at me. "My mama makes soup too, but it doesn't taste like this." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, and the word slipped out before I could stop it. After lunch, Caroline excused herself to use the bathroom. I heard her being sick, the sound muffled but unmistakable. William's eyes widened with fear. "Mama gets sick sometimes," he said quietly to me. "The doctors say it's because she has something bad inside her that they can't take out." My heart broke for this little boy who already understood too much about loss. At 4 years old, he was learning that the world could be cruel, that mothers could disappear, that nothing was permanent. When Caroline came back, she looked even paler. She smiled at William, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm okay, baby, just tired." Thomas cleared his throat. "Margaret, we've imposed enough. There's a motel about 20 miles from here. We'll get a room for the night and come back tomorrow to discuss." "Stay," I heard myself say. The word hung in the air between us. Stay, as if it were that simple. As if 3 years of abandonment could be erased with one act of hospitality. "Margaret, we can't—" Thomas started. "You can take the guest room," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "There's a twin bed in there. William can sleep with Caroline, and Thomas, you can take the couch." Caroline looked at me with something like gratitude, but also confusion. "Mrs. Sullivan." "Margaret, I don't understand. Why would you do this for us?" I looked at William, who was watching me with those achingly familiar eyes. "Because that child is exhausted. Because you're sick. And because, despite everything, I'm not the kind of woman who turns people away when they need help." I wasn't sure if that made me strong or foolish. Maybe both. That night, I gave Caroline fresh sheets for the guest bed. I found some of James's old clothes in the attic. A small t-shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on it that somehow still looked new after all these years. William's eyes lit up when he saw it. "A T-Rex," he exclaimed. "That's the best dinosaur." "My son thought so too," I said softly. Caroline helped William into his pajamas while I made up the couch for Thomas. We moved around each other like dancers in a surreal ballet, each of us knowing the steps but not understanding the music. When William was tucked into bed, Caroline came downstairs. Thomas had gone outside to smoke, a habit he'd picked up in his absence. It was just the two of us in the kitchen. "I need to thank you properly," Caroline said. "This couldn't have been easy." "It's not," I admitted. "But nothing about this situation is easy for anyone." She sat down at the kitchen table, and I poured us both tea. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time that Caroline no longer had in abundance. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Anything. Did you love him?" "Thomas?" Caroline was quiet for a long moment. "I thought I did. He was kind to me, gentle. He never raised his voice, never made me feel small. But looking back now, I wonder if what I loved was the version of himself he created for me. The man without a past, without complicated history, the fresh start. And when you found out he'd lied, I was angry, furious. I wanted to leave, take William and disappear. But by then, I was already sick. The diagnosis came a month after I discovered the truth about you." She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I didn't have the luxury of righteous anger. I had to think about my son's future. So you came here. I came here because William needs more than Thomas can give him. He needs stability. He needs a home. And Thomas, he needs to make amends. Thomas can't undo what he's done," I said quietly. "Some things don't get fixed with apologies." "I know," Caroline replied. "But maybe he can try to do better going forward, for William's sake." Through the kitchen window, I could see Thomas standing in the backyard, his cigarette glowing in the darkness. He was looking up at the stars, and I wondered what he was thinking. Was he remembering all the nights we'd sat on that same patio, Planning our retirement, dreaming about grandchildren who would visit during summers. How much time do you have? I asked Caroline. The doctors said 6 months. That was 3 weeks ago. But I can feel it, Margaret. I'm getting weaker. Some days I can barely get out of bed. Today was a good day, which is why we made the drive. Does William understand? Her voice cracked. He knows I'm sick. He knows I go to doctors a lot, but he doesn't understand death yet. Not really. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that his mother is dying? I thought about James, about standing in front of his hospital bed, trying to explain to his sisters that their brother wasn't going to come home. Rebecca had been 12, Linda, 9. They'd both cried in my arms, asking questions I couldn't answer. Why him? Why our family? When would it stop hurting? 23 years later, I still didn't have answers to those questions. You tell him the truth, I finally said. Gently, but honestly, children are stronger than we think, and lies, even well-intentioned ones, they have a way of causing more harm. Caroline wiped her eyes. Thomas wanted to wait. He thought it would be too much for William, but I think you're right. He deserves to know. We sat in silence for a while. 2 women connected by the same man, but separated by everything else. I should have hated her. She'd been with my husband. She'd borne his child. She'd lived 3 years of the life that should have been mine, but I couldn't hate her. She was dying. She was a mother trying to protect her son, and she'd been lied to just as much as I had. I'll need time, I said, to think about what you're asking, to decide if I can really do this. Of course, I don't expect... But you can stay while I figure it out. William needs stability, even if it's temporary, and you need rest. Caroline reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was cold, despite the warm tea. Thank you, Margaret. You're a better woman than I could ever be. Don't say that, I told her. You're doing what any mother would do. You're trying to save your child. When Thomas came back inside, he found us still sitting at the table. He looked at our joined hands with something like wonder. I made up the couch, I said without emotion. There are extra blankets in the hall closet if you get cold. That first night was the longest of my life. I lay in my bed, our bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. Caroline's soft cough from the guest room. William's sleepy murmuring. Thomas's restless shifting on the couch downstairs. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the familiar cracks in the plaster that I'd memorized over decades. This room had witnessed everything. Our wedding night, when Thomas carried me over the threshold and we were so young, so certain that love was enough. The births of our children, back when doctors still made house calls. The nights when Thomas held me as I sobbed after James's funeral, when I was sure I'd never be whole again. And now, it was witness to this strange new reality where my husband slept on the couch because another woman was in our guest room. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to the sound of small footsteps in the hallway. The clock read 2:47 a.m. I got up and opened my door quietly. William stood in the hallway crying softly. I want my mama, he whispered when he saw me. I had a bad dream. I knelt down to his level, my old knees protesting. Let's go check on her, okay? But when we opened the guest room door, Caroline was asleep, her breathing labored and uneven. I didn't want to wake her. She needed rest more than anything. Your mama is sleeping, I told William. Sometimes when mamas are sick, they need extra sleep to get better. How about we get you some warm milk? He nodded, still sniffling, and took my hand. His little fingers wrapped around mine with complete trust, and something in my chest cracked open. In the kitchen, I heated milk on the stove the old-fashioned way, the way my own mother had done for me when I was small. William sat at the table, swinging his legs. Are you my grandma? He asked suddenly. The question stopped me cold. I turned from the stove to look at him. That's complicated, sweetheart. My friend Jake has a grandma. She gives him cookies and reads him stories. Do you give cookies? Despite everything, I smiled. I do make cookies. Chocolate chip. Do you like chocolate chip? His face lit up. They're my favorite? Mine too, I said. And it was true. I hadn't baked in months. What was the point when you lived alone? But looking at this little boy with his hopeful eyes, I suddenly remembered the joy of baking for someone who appreciated it. I gave him the warm milk with a little honey stirred in. He drank it slowly, leaving a milk mustache that made him look even younger than 4. "I miss my house," he said quietly, "and my toys. Mama said we had to leave them behind because we were going on an adventure. But I don't like this adventure." "Adventures can be scary," I told him, "especially when we don't understand why we're on them." "Do you ever get scared?" William asked, looking up at me with those eyes that held too much knowledge for a child his age. I thought about lying, about giving him the reassuring adult answer that grandmothers are never scared, but Caroline was right. Children deserve the truth. "Yes," I said. "I get scared sometimes. I'm scared right now, actually." "Why?" "Because everything is changing, and I don't know what's going to happen next. That's always scary, not knowing." He nodded solemnly, as if he understood perfectly, and perhaps he did. His whole world was changing too. "Can I tell you a secret?" he whispered. "Of course. I'm scared that my mama's going to disappear, like my friend Jake's dog. One day the dog was there, and the next day Jake said the dog went to heaven. I asked Mama if she was going to heaven, and she cried. I don't want her to cry." My throat tightened. This child, this innocent little boy, was trying to protect his dying mother from his own fears. "It's okay to be scared, William, and it's okay to talk about it. Your mama loves you very much. She won't be upset if you tell her you're scared. Promise." I promise. By the time I carried him back upstairs, he'd fallen asleep in my arms halfway through the climb. My back was aching and my heart was full of confusing emotions. I tucked him into bed next to Caroline, who stirred but didn't wake. When I came back downstairs, Thomas was sitting at the kitchen table. He'd made coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. But William had a nightmare. Thomas closed his eyes. He's been having them more often, since Caroline got worse. We sat in silence, drinking coffee like we'd done thousands of mornings before. But everything was different now. The easy companionship we'd once shared was gone, replaced by this brittle, painful awareness of all that had been broken. "I don't expect your forgiveness," Thomas finally said. "I don't even expect your understanding. But I need you to know that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Then why did you do it?" The question I'd been holding back finally escaped. Was I not enough? Did I bore you? Was our life together so terrible that you had to run away and invent a new one? "No," he said emphatically. "God, no, Margaret. You were never the problem. I was. I turned 80 and realized I was old, really old, and I panicked. I looked at our life and saw an ending instead of everything we'd built together. I saw death approaching and I ran from it like a coward. So you found a younger woman and started over. I didn't plan to fall in love with Caroline. I didn't plan any of it. I was working at a construction site in Nevada, trying to feel useful. She was a waitress at the diner where the crew ate lunch. We started talking. She was kind. She didn't know anything about my past, my failures, my regrets. So you lied to her," I said. "You told her I was dead so you could pretend to be someone you weren't." Thomas nodded, shame washing over his weathered face. I know how terrible that sounds. I know what it says about me. But in that moment, it felt easier to create a fiction than to face the truth of what I'd done. By the time I realized I loved her, I was in too deep. The lie had become its own prison. And the baby was a surprise. Caroline was 41. The doctors had told her years ago that she couldn't have children. When she got pregnant, she thought it was a miracle. His voice broke. William was supposed to be our second chance, our proof that life could still hold joy and new beginnings. But then she got sick. But then she got sick, he repeated, and the miracle turned into a nightmare. She found out about you 2 months after the diagnosis. She was going through my wallet looking for insurance cards and found our old wedding photo. The one I'd forgotten was tucked behind my driver's license. I remembered that photo. We'd been so young. Thomas in his army uniform, me in my mother's wedding dress, 2 kids who thought love was enough to conquer anything. "She threw me out," Thomas continued, "said she needed time to process everything. I stayed in a motel for 3 weeks. But then her condition got worse, and she called me back. Not because she forgave me, but because William needed his father. Because she was dying and had to put aside her anger for her son's sake. She's stronger than both of us," I said. "Yes," Thomas agreed. "She is." We sat in silence again, the first light of dawn creeping through the kitchen window. Somewhere outside, birds were beginning their morning songs. Life continued, indifferent to our human dramas. "What do you want from me, Thomas?" I finally asked. "What do you expect will happen here?" He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I want you to help me raise my son. I want you to give him the stable home that Caroline can't provide anymore. I want—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I want the chance to prove that I can still be the man I should have been all along. And what about us? What about our marriage?" "I don't have the right to ask for that back," he said quietly. "I destroyed it. I know that, but maybe we can find a way to coexist. For William's sake. He's innocent in all of this." I thought about William sleeping upstairs, his small hand curled around his mother's finger. I thought about James and the grandson I never got to have because my son died too young. I thought about Rebecca and Linda, scattered across the country with their own lives, their own families that didn't include me. "I need time," I said. "I need to think about whether I can do this, whether I should do this." Thomas nodded. "I understand. Take all the time you need." But time was the one thing we didn't have. Over the next few days, as Caroline's condition visibly deteriorated, that became painfully clear. She tried to hide it at first. She'd get up in the morning, help William get dressed, sit with him at breakfast, but by mid-morning, she'd be exhausted, retreating to the guest room with apologies that grew weaker each day. Her skin took on a yellowish tint. Her eyes became hollow. The cancer was consuming her from the inside out. William seemed to understand without being told. He became quieter, more careful around his mother. He'd bring her water without being asked. He'd sit beside her bed and read her books, making up stories to go with the pictures. And somehow, in the midst of all this tragedy, something unexpected happened. I started to care for them. Not romantically. God knows the wounds Thomas had inflicted went too deep for that. But maternally, the way I'd cared for my own children. I cooked meals that Caroline could keep down, bland soups, soft bread, ginger tea. I played with William in the backyard, pushing him on the old tire swing that Thomas had hung for our kids decades ago. I found myself humming in the kitchen again, a habit I'd lost during the 3 years of solitude. Thomas watched all of this with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. He tried to help, but he was clumsy with it. He'd been absent for so much of our children's early years, working long hours to support us. Now, faced with the daily realities of caring for a dying woman and a 4-year-old, he was lost. One afternoon, I found him sitting in the garage, crying. He didn't hear me approach. "I don't know how to do this," he said when he finally noticed me. "I don't know how to be what they need, what William needs." "Then learn," I said simply. "You learned how to leave. Learn how to stay." The next day, I taught him how to make William's breakfast the way the boy liked it. Scrambled eggs with cheese, toast cut into triangles. I showed him how to read the signs that Caroline was having a bad pain day and needed her medication. I explained that sometimes William's silence meant he was overwhelmed and needed space, not entertainment. Thomas absorbed it all like a student studying for the most important test of his life, because that's what it was. This was his last chance to be the father he'd never quite managed to be before. Rebecca called one evening. I hadn't told her about Thomas's return yet. I hadn't known how. "Mom, I've been trying to reach you for days. Are you okay? You haven't been answering your cell phone." I'd forgotten to charge it. "I'm fine, honey. Things have been complicated." "Complicated how?" I took a deep breath. "Your father came back." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "He what?" "He came back 3 days ago, with a woman named Caroline and a 4-year-old boy named William." More silence. I could hear Rebecca breathing, trying to process what I'd just told her. "Are you telling me that bastard had the audacity to show up at your house with his mistress and his illegitimate child?" "Rebecca, please." "No, Mom, no. Tell me you slammed the door in his face. Tell me you called the police. Tell me you didn't let him back into your life after what he did to you." "It's not that simple," I said quietly. "Caroline is dying. She has cancer. She has maybe months left, maybe less. They came here because William needs a home after she's gone. And that's supposed to make it okay. That's supposed to erase 3 years of abandonment? Mom, are you hearing yourself?" I sat down heavily in the kitchen chair. "I'm not saying it's okay. Nothing about this is okay. But that little boy is innocent. He didn't choose any of this. Neither did you, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. You didn't choose to be abandoned. You didn't choose to spend 3 years alone, waiting for a husband who was off playing house with another woman. And now he wants you to clean up his mess, to raise his child while he… What? Pretends the last 3 years didn't happen. I haven't decided anything yet, I told her. I'm trying to figure out what's right. What's right is telling him to go to hell. What's right is protecting yourself for once, instead of sacrificing everything for people who don't appreciate it. There was pain in her voice, and I realized this wasn't just about Thomas. This was about all the times she'd watched me put others first, all the times she'd seen me bend myself into shapes to accommodate everyone else's needs. Let me talk to him, Rebecca demanded. Put Dad on the phone. Rebecca, I don't think… Put him on the phone, Mom. I found Thomas in the living room, reading to William. The sight of them together, this grandfather and grandson who barely knew each other, did something strange to my heart. Rebecca wants to talk to you, I said, holding out the phone. Thomas's face went pale. He handed the book to William and took the phone with shaking hands. Hello, Rebecca, he said quietly. I couldn't hear her exact words, but I heard the volume and the fury. Thomas didn't try to defend himself. He just stood there, letting her rage wash over him, accepting every harsh word as his due. I know, he said finally. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did to your mother was unforgivable. But Rebecca, please. If not for me, then for William. He's your half-brother. He's family. Whatever she said next made Thomas close his eyes in pain. I understand, Thomas said into the phone, his voice barely above a whisper. I understand, and I don't blame you. But your mother, she's being incredibly gracious about this, and I won't let you make her feel guilty for showing kindness to a dying woman and an innocent child. He handed the phone back to me and walked out of the room. William looked up from his book, confused by the tension he could feel but not understand. Mom! Rebecca's voice was hoarse from crying. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you. This isn't your fault. I know, honey. But I can't forgive him. I won't. What he did was inexcusable. I'm not asking you to forgive him, I said gently. I'm not even sure I can forgive him. But I'm trying to figure out what's best for everyone involved, including that little boy who didn't ask to be born into this mess. You have the biggest heart of anyone I know, Rebecca said. But sometimes I wish you'd put yourself first. Just once. After we hung up, I went upstairs to check on Caroline. She was awake, staring at the ceiling. She looked even more frail than she had that morning. I heard some of that, she said quietly. Your daughter. She has every right to be angry. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Anger is easier than sadness sometimes. Rebecca's angry because she doesn't want to feel the hurt underneath. I'm so sorry, Caroline whispered, for all of this, for disrupting your life, for bringing this chaos to your doorstep. If there was any other way, I know, I said. And I did know. I could see it in her eyes. The desperation of a mother running out of time, the fear that her child would end up alone and unloved. Can I ask you something? Caroline said. And please, be honest. Of course. Do you think you could ever love William? Really love him? Not just tolerate him out of obligation? I thought about the question, about William's laugh when I pushed him on the swing, about the way he'd taken my hand in the middle of the night when he was scared, about how he'd asked if I was his grandma with such hope in his voice. I think, I said slowly, that love isn't always immediate. Sometimes it grows slowly, like a garden. You plant seeds and water them and wait. I can't promise you I'll love him the way a grandmother loves a grandson she's known since birth, but I can promise you I'll give him a chance to take root in my heart. Caroline started to cry. That's more than I could have hoped for. That's more than we deserve. No child deserves to be unloved, I said firmly. Whatever happens between Thomas and me, whatever anger I'm entitled to feel, William deserves a home where he's wanted. That night, I made a decision. I got out my old recipe box, the wooden one my mother had given me as a wedding present, and found the card for chocolate chip cookies. William had asked about them days ago, and I'd promised him I'd make them. At 9 p.m., with everyone else asleep, I stood in my kitchen and measured flour and sugar. I creamed butter and folded in chocolate chips. The familiar motions were meditative, grounding. This was something I knew how to do, something I could control in a situation where so much felt chaotic. As the first batch baked, filling the house with the smell of butter and vanilla, Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "I'm baking," I said, stating the obvious. He smiled slightly, the first real smile I'd seen from him since he'd returned. "I can see that. Margaret, you're baking at 9 p.m. You never bake this late." I promised William cookies. Thomas was quiet for a moment, then. "You're going to do it, aren't you? You're going to help us." I pulled the first tray from the oven, the cookies golden and perfect. "I'm going to help William. That's not the same as forgiving you, Thomas. That's not the same as taking you back or pretending the last 3 years didn't happen. I know. I'm doing this because I've spent 3 years alone in this house, rattling around like a ghost. Because my daughters have their own lives and I see them maybe twice a year. Because I'm 83 years old and I've realized that holding on to anger and hurt doesn't keep me company on cold nights." I set the cookie tray down and finally looked at him. Really looked at him. "I'm doing this because that little boy upstairs reminds me of James. Because Caroline is dying and I know what it's like to lose someone too soon. Because despite everything you've done, despite every way you've hurt me, I'm still the woman who believes in doing the right thing even when it's hard." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve you." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But William deserves a family. So I'm going to be his grandmother. I'm going to love him and care for him and give him the stability his mother can't provide anymore." "And me?" Thomas asked quietly. "Where do I fit in all of this?" I thought about that question. About the man I'd married 61 years ago and the stranger who'd returned to my doorstep. About all the years in between, both the good and the broken. "You fit wherever you earn your place," I said finally. "You want to be William's father? Then be his father. Show up every day, do the hard work, learn how to braid hair and pack lunches and wipe tears, prove that you can stay when things get difficult. And us? Is there any chance for us?" I transferred the cookies to a cooling rack, each movement deliberate. "I don't know, Thomas. Ask me again in a year." The next morning, William's face lit up when he saw the plate of cookies on the kitchen table. "You made them," he exclaimed, reaching for one before I could tell him to wait until after breakfast. "Just one before eggs," I said, but I was smiling. It felt good to see joy on his face, even if it was just over a cookie. Caroline came downstairs slowly, holding the railing with both hands. She'd lost more weight, I realized. Her clothes hung on her frame like they belonged to someone else. "Those smell amazing," she said, though I noticed she didn't take one. Eating had become difficult for her. We all sat together at the breakfast table, an odd family forged by circumstances none of us would have chosen. Thomas made scrambled eggs, concentrating hard to get them right. William swung his legs under the table, chocolate still on his face. Caroline sipped ginger tea and watched her son with eyes full of love and unspoken goodbyes. And I presided over it all, this accidental matriarch of a broken family trying to piece itself back together. After breakfast, Caroline asked to speak with me privately. We went to the guest room, and she sat down heavily on the bed. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about what happens after I die. There are practical things we need to discuss, legal things." She pulled out a folder from her suitcase. "I've prepared everything. I'm signing over full custody of William to Thomas, but I want you to be listed as William's legal guardian too, just in case something happens to Thomas. I know that's a lot to ask." "It makes sense," I said. "If something happened to Thomas, William shouldn't end up with strangers." Caroline opened the folder and showed me the papers. She'd thought of everything. Custody arrangements, William's medical records, his birth certificate, a letter she'd written for him to read when he was older, explaining everything. "There's also this," she said, pulling out a small photo album, "pictures of William from the day he was born until now. I made copies for Thomas, but I wanted you to have a set too, so you could know what his early years were like, so you could tell him stories about when he was a baby, even though you weren't there." I flipped through the album. William as a newborn, tiny and red-faced. His first smile. His first steps. His first birthday. Caroline holding him in front of a cake shaped like a dinosaur. Page after page of a life I hadn't been part of, but was now being asked to help continue. "He looks like Thomas," I said softly. "Same eyes, Same smile. He has his father's stubbornness, too, Caroline said with a weak laugh, and his love of bad jokes. Thomas tried to teach him knock-knock jokes last week. They were terrible, but William thought they were hilarious. I want to tell you about his favorites, Caroline continued, her voice gaining strength as if sharing these details was urgent. He loves dinosaurs, especially T-Rexes. He's afraid of thunderstorms but pretends not to be. He likes peanut butter sandwiches with the crusts cut off. He needs a nightlight to sleep, the one shaped like a moon. He has a stuffed elephant named Mr. Trunk that he's had since he was 6 months old. He can't sleep without it. I listened, absorbing every detail. These weren't just facts about a child. They were Caroline's legacy, the pieces of herself and her love that she could pass on. When he's upset, he doesn't always cry, she went on. Sometimes he just gets very quiet. That's when you need to sit with him and wait. Eventually, he'll tell you what's wrong. He likes to be read to before bed. His favorite book is about a little engine that could... Her voice broke. I won't be there to read it to him anymore. I reached out and took her hand. But the book will still be there, and someone will read it to him. I'll read it to him. Promise me something, Caroline whispered. Promise me you'll tell him about me. Not just the facts, but... Tell him I loved him. Tell him every day if you have to. I'm so afraid he'll forget me. He won't forget you, I said firmly. You're his mother. That kind of love doesn't fade. And I promise, I'll tell him stories about you. I'll make sure he knows how much you loved him, how hard you fought to make sure he'd be okay. Caroline pulled me into a hug. She was so thin I could feel her bones. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you for giving him a chance. Thank you for being kinder than anyone could expect you to be. After she'd cried herself out, we went back downstairs. Thomas was outside with William, teaching him how to throw a ball. Through the window, I watched them, this grandfather and grandson learning each other, building a relationship from scratch. William threw the ball wildly, and it sailed over Thomas's head. They both laughed, and for a moment, you could forget about the cancer and the betrayal and all the complicated emotions tangled up in this situation. For a moment, there was just a man and a boy playing catch in the golden afternoon light. Linda called that evening. Rebecca must have told her. Is it true? Linda demanded. Dad's really back? Yes. And you let him in? Yes. Mom, what the hell are you thinking? Unlike Rebecca's anger, Linda's was cold, clinical. She'd always been more like Thomas that way. Practical, logical, unwilling to let emotions cloud her judgment. I'm thinking, I said carefully, that life is complicated, that people make mistakes, that a 4-year-old boy shouldn't suffer because the adults in his life made poor choices. Don't use the kid as an excuse, Linda shot back. This isn't about him. This is about you not being able to set boundaries, about you prioritizing everyone else's needs over your own. Again, you're right, I said, surprising her into silence. I do often put others first, but Linda, this isn't just about being selfless or being a martyr. This is about looking at my life and realizing I have a choice. I can stay angry and alone, or I can choose to be part of something, even if it's messy and complicated. He abandoned you, Mom, for 3 years. No phone calls, no letters, nothing. And now he shows up with proof that he was building a whole new life while you were here grieving. I know. And I'm not saying I've forgiven him. I'm not saying we're going to go back to the way things were, but I am saying that I refuse to let his mistakes cost that little boy a family. Linda was quiet for a long time. I want to understand. I really do. But I look at what he did to you, and I just feel rage. Pure rage. I feel that too sometimes, I admitted. Usually at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. But then I wake up and William asks if I'll make him pancakes, and I realize that rage doesn't keep anyone warm. Rage doesn't give that boy a home. So what? You're just going to raise Dad's illegitimate kid and pretend everything is fine? No. I'm going to raise my grandson and acknowledge that everything is complicated. There's a difference. After we hung up, I felt exhausted. Defending my choices to my daughters was harder than making the choices themselves. They were hurt, and they had every right to be. But they were also hundreds of miles away with their own families, their own lives. They could afford to be righteous because they weren't the ones who had to live with the consequences of turning William away. That night, Caroline took a bad turn. I heard her crying out around midnight, Thomas and I both rushed to her room. She was doubled over in pain, her face gray. "The medication," she gasped. "I need the medication." Thomas fumbled with the pill bottles while I sat beside her, holding her hand. William woke up, confused and frightened by his mother's cries. "What's wrong with Mama?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. "She's having a pain day," I told him, pulling him into my arms. But we're going to help her feel better. Okay?" Thomas finally got the right pills and helped Caroline swallow them with water. We waited for them to take effect. The four of us crowded in that small room, united by fear and love and the brutal reality of terminal illness. When Caroline finally fell asleep, I carried William back to his room. He clung to me, his small body shaking. "Is Mama going to die?" he whispered. The question I'd been dreading. The question Caroline had been dreading. I sat on the edge of William's bed, still holding him. Outside, a late summer storm was brewing, thunder rumbling in the distance. The moon nightlight cast soft shadows on the walls. "Yes, sweetheart," I said gently. "Your Mama is very sick, and the doctors can't make her better. She's going to die." William started to cry harder. "I don't want her to go away. I need her." "I know you do, and she doesn't want to leave you. But sometimes our bodies stop working, and we don't have a choice. Where will she go?" I thought about how to answer. Different people believe different things. Some people believe we go to heaven. Some believe we become stars. What matters is that the love your Mama has for you doesn't go anywhere. That stays right here. I placed my hand over his heart. Forever. But who will take care of me? Your daddy and I will take care of you. You'll live here, in this house. You'll have your own room, and your toys, and all the chocolate chip cookies you can eat. Well, maybe not all of them, I added, trying to coax a smile. He didn't smile. "But I don't know you. I don't know this house." He was right. I was a stranger to him. This house was foreign. His whole world was about to change, and he was smart enough to understand that, even at 4 years old. "You're right," I said. "You don't know me very well yet. But I promise you, William, I'm going to do my very best to take care of you, to make you feel safe and loved. And your daddy is going to try his hardest, too. What if I forget what Mama looks like?" The question broke my heart. "We won't let that happen. We have lots of pictures of your Mama, and I'm going to tell you stories about her every single day. We'll remember her together." He was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "Can Mr. Trunk stay with me? Even after?" "Of course. Mr. Trunk will always stay with you." I held him until he fell asleep, his tears drying on my shoulder. When I finally laid him down and pulled the blanket up to his chin, I saw Thomas standing in the doorway. He'd been listening. "You're going to be wonderful with him," Thomas said quietly. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "It's been so long since I've taken care of a child. Everything is different now. The rules, the toys, the way kids learn. I'm 83 years old, Thomas. What if I'm too old for this?" "You're not too old. You're exactly what he needs." Thomas stepped into the room. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything, for being stronger than I ever was." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "We haven't even gotten to the hard part." But the hard part came sooner than any of us expected.
3 days later, Caroline collapsed in the kitchen. One moment she was standing at the counter trying to pour herself water. The next, she was on the floor, unconscious. Thomas called 911 while I knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. William stood frozen in the doorway. Mr. Trunk clutched to his chest. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The paramedics worked efficiently, asking questions I couldn't always answer. What medications was she on?
When did she last eat? How long had she been sick? Thomas rode with her to the hospital. I stayed home with William, who had gone completely silent. He sat on the couch, not moving, not speaking, just staring at the spot where his mother had fallen. "She's going to be okay," I told him, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. He didn't respond. I tried to distract him with lunch, with books, with the promise of more cookies. Nothing worked. He just sat there, clutching Mr. Trunk, waiting. Thomas called 2 hours later. "It's not good," he said, his voice thick. "The cancer has spread to her brain. She's had a series of small strokes. The doctors say it's a matter of days now, maybe hours. Should I bring William? I don't know. Thomas sounded lost. I don't know if he should see her like this. She's not conscious, Margaret. She's on so many machines. It's terrifying even for me. Let me talk to him, I said. I sat down next to William and took his small hand in mine. Your mama is at the hospital. She's very sick. The doctors are doing everything they can to help her. Your daddy wants to know if you want to go see her. William looked up at me with those gray-blue eyes. Will it make her better if I go? The question destroyed me. No, sweetheart. But it might make her happy to know you're there, even if she can't tell you. Then I want to go. We drove to the hospital in my old car. William sat in the back seat, still silent, still clutching Mr. Trunk. I found myself talking to fill the silence, telling him about the trees we passed, the stores we drove by, anything to keep the awful quiet at bay. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and despair. William held my hand tightly as we walked through the corridors. Other patients and visitors gave us sympathetic looks, an old woman and a small child, clearly heading somewhere sad. Thomas met us outside Caroline's room. He'd been crying. She's stable for now, he said. But Margaret, she looks different. He was right. The woman in the hospital bed barely resembled the Caroline who'd knocked on my door just weeks ago. She was skeletal, her skin yellow, her breathing assisted by a ventilator. Machines beeped and hummed around her, keeping her alive even as her body shut down. William stopped in the doorway, afraid to enter. That's not my mama, William whispered, his voice small and frightened. Thomas knelt down beside him. It is, buddy. The machines are helping her breathe right now. She's resting. She looks scary. I know, but she's still your mama, and I think she'd want you to talk to her, even if she can't answer back. I watched as Thomas gently led William to Caroline's bedside. He lifted the boy so he could be closer to his mother's face. William reached out tentatively and touched her hand. Mama, he said softly. It's me. It's William. The machines continued their steady rhythm. Caroline didn't move. I'm scared, Mama, William continued, tears rolling down his cheeks. I don't want you to go to heaven. I want you to stay here with me. I had to turn away, pressing my hand to my mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. Thomas was crying too, holding his son as the boy said goodbye to his mother. The grandma lady is nice, William told Caroline. She makes good cookies. And Daddy is learning how to make eggs the way I like them. We're going to be okay, so you don't have to worry about me. Even in his grief, this little boy was trying to comfort his dying mother, trying to give her permission to let go. We stayed for 2 hours. William talked to his mother about dinosaurs and cookies and the swing in the backyard. Thomas held Caroline's other hand, whispering apologies and promises. And I stood in the corner, bearing witness to this impossible moment, this tragic end to a complicated story. When the nurse came to tell us visiting hours were over, William didn't want to leave. I have to stay with Mama, he insisted. She needs me. I know, sweetheart, I said gently. But your mama needs rest right now, and you need dinner and sleep. We'll come back tomorrow, I promise. What if she goes to heaven while we're gone? The question hung in the air. What if she did? Thomas looked at me helplessly. I made a decision. Then we'll come right back, I told William. If your mama goes to heaven tonight, your daddy will call us, and we'll come right back to say a proper goodbye. But you need to rest too. You need to be strong. Reluctantly, William let me lead him out of the room. At the doorway, he turned back one more time. I love you, Mama, he called out. I love you so much. If Caroline could hear him, she gave no sign. The machines continued their steady rhythm, breathing for her, keeping her body alive even as everything else slipped away. We drove home in silence. William fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from grief. When we arrived home, I carried him inside and put him to bed still fully clothed, not wanting to wake him. Thomas stayed at the hospital. The call came at 3:47 a.m. I was awake, of course. I'd been lying in bed, listening to the house settle, thinking about Caroline in that sterile room surrounded by machines. When the phone rang, I already knew. She's gone, Thomas said, his voice hollow. She went peacefully, about 20 minutes ago, I was holding her hand. I told her that William would be okay, that we'd take care of him, and then she just stopped breathing. "I'll wake William," I said. "We'll come now." "No." Thomas's voice was firm. "Let him sleep. There's nothing he can do here now. Let him have a few more hours before his world completely falls apart." So I lay back down and waited for morning, knowing that when William woke up, everything would change. His mother would be gone. His father and I would be all he had left. When dawn finally came, I made pancakes. It seemed important to maintain some normalcy, to give William one last ordinary morning before delivering the news that would divide his life into before and after. He came downstairs rubbing his eyes, Mr. Trunk dragging behind him. "Is Daddy home?" he asked. "Not yet, sweetheart. Come sit down. I need to talk to you about something." He climbed into his chair, and I set a plate of pancakes in front of him. He didn't eat. He just looked at me with those wise, sad eyes. "Mama went to heaven," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I whispered. "She went to heaven last night. Your daddy was with her. She wasn't alone." William nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting this. "Did she hurt?" "No, baby. She was sleeping. She just went to sleep and didn't wake up." "Like Sleeping Beauty?" "Yes," I said, grateful for his childhood frame of reference. "Like Sleeping Beauty." But Sleeping Beauty woke up when the prince kissed her. My heart broke. That's in stories, sweetheart. In real life, sometimes people go to sleep and they don't wake up. But that doesn't mean they're not still with us. Your mama will always be in your heart. William pushed his plate away. "I'm not hungry." "That's okay." He slid off his chair and climbed into my lap. Something he'd never done before. He buried his face in my shoulder and finally, he let himself cry. Not the quiet tears from the hospital, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. I held him and rocked him, the way I'd held my own children through their griefs and fears. I stroked his hair and whispered that it would be okay, even though I wasn't sure it would be. I let him cry until there were no tears left, until he was hiccuping and exhausted. Thomas came home an hour later. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Father and son held each other in the kitchen, and I stepped back, giving them space for their shared grief. The next few days were a blur of arrangements and phone calls. Caroline had been thorough in her planning. She'd already prepaid for her cremation. She'd written specific instructions about what she wanted. A simple memorial service, her ashes scattered in the desert where she'd grown up, no funeral procession. She didn't want it to be sad, Thomas said, reading from her notes. She wanted people to remember the good things. She even picked out the music she wanted played. William stayed close to me during those days. He'd wake up crying in the middle of the night, and I'd carry him to my bed, where he'd sleep curled against me like a baby animal seeking warmth. He stopped talking except for one-word answers. He wouldn't eat unless I sat with him and ate too. The memorial service was small. Thomas had tracked down a few of Caroline's friends from Nevada. They came, shared stories I didn't know, cried for the woman who'd been taken too soon. William sat on my lap the entire time, staring at the photo of his mother that stood on an easel at the front of the room. She looked so young in the picture, healthy and vibrant, her dark hair shining in the sunlight. It was hard to reconcile that image with the woman I'd known, the one already being consumed by disease. After the service, Thomas took Caroline's ashes to Nevada to scatter them as she'd requested. He took William with him, saying the boy should be part of saying goodbye. They were gone for 3 days. During that time, I prepared William's room. I moved Rebecca's old furniture out of storage, a small bed with a blue comforter, a dresser with dinosaur stickers still clinging to the sides from when James was young. I hung curtains and set up the moon nightlight Caroline had mentioned. I arranged William's few belongings, his clothes, his books, Mr. Trunk on the pillow. I made a space that said, "You belong here." When they returned, William was even quieter than before. Thomas looked hollow-eyed and grief-stricken. "We scattered her ashes at sunrise," Thomas told me. In this beautiful spot overlooking the desert, William sang her a song, something Caroline used to sing to him at bedtime. I didn't even know he remembered the words, but he sang the whole thing without crying. "He's being brave for you," I said. "He shouldn't have to be brave. He's 4 years old. He should be playing and laughing and being a kid, not scattering his mother's ashes in the desert." That night, I showed William his new room. He stood in the doorway, taking it all in: the dinosaur blankets, the moon nightlight, his toys arranged on shelves. "This is mine?" he asked softly. "This is yours? Your room? In your home?" He walked to the bed and climbed in, still holding Mr. Trunk. "It's nice," he said, which from a grieving 4-year-old felt like the highest praise possible. Establishing a routine was the hardest part. William had night terrors that first month. He'd wake up screaming for Caroline, disoriented and terrified. Thomas and I would take turns comforting him, walking him back to sleep, promising him he was safe. During the day, I tried to create structure: breakfast at 8, playing in the backyard at 9, lunch at noon, quiet time in the afternoon, dinner at 6, bath at 7, stories at 8. The routine of childhood, the predictable rhythm that helps little ones feel secure. Some days were better than others. Some days, William would laugh at something silly Thomas said, or get excited about a butterfly in the garden. Other days, he'd sit on the porch stairs and cry for his mama, and nothing we did could comfort him. Rebecca called more often, her anger softening into concern. "How is he doing?" "He's grieving," I told her. "But he's resilient. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for." "And how are you doing, Mom?" It was the first time anyone had asked me that. "I'm tired," I admitted. "I forgot how exhausting it is to care for a small child. I'm 83 years old, Rebecca. Some days I can barely keep up. Then let Dad handle it. He's the one who created this situation. It takes both of us. William needs both of us." Linda still hadn't called. I knew Rebecca talked to her, knew she was aware of everything happening. But Linda was holding on to her anger like a shield. I understood. Sometimes anger is easier than grief or forgiveness. 6 weeks after Caroline's death, I enrolled William in preschool. He needed other children, needed normalcy beyond the grief-soaked atmosphere of our home. That first morning, dropping him off, was harder than I'd expected. "Hey, what if no one likes me?" William asked, clutching Mr. Trunk. "Then they're silly," I told him, "because you're wonderful. Mama used to say that." She was right. He let me walk him to his classroom. The teacher, a young woman named Miss Sarah, knelt down to his level. "Hi, William. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have so much fun today." William looked back at me uncertainly. "I'll be here at pickup time," I promised. 3 hours, that's all. And then we'll come home and have snacks. Cookies. If you want cookies, we'll have cookies." That seemed to satisfy him. He took Miss Sarah's hand and walked into the classroom, though he looked back at me 3 times before disappearing through the door. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. For Caroline, who should have been here for this milestone. For William, who was so brave despite his fear. For myself, who'd somehow become a mother again at an age when most people were enjoying their retirement. When I finally drove home, Thomas was waiting in the kitchen. "How did it go?" he asked. He was scared, but he went in, I said, pouring myself coffee. 3 hours feels like a long time to worry. Thomas nodded. "I've been thinking, Margaret, we should talk about the practical side of things. Money, legal arrangements. I need to formalize custody, get William enrolled in my insurance. And we need to discuss how we're going to split responsibilities long-term." Long-term, I repeated. It was the first time either of us had acknowledged that this wasn't temporary. This was our life now. "I've been applying for jobs," Thomas continued. "I can't keep living off my savings. I need steady income to support William. But most jobs for someone my age, they're not great. Warehouse work, night security, things that will take me away from home for hours. I have my pension," I said, "and the house is paid off. We're not rich, but we can manage. I can't ask you to support my son financially." "You're not asking, I'm offering. Thomas, I'm already in this. I'm already William's grandmother in every way that matters. His well-being is my concern now, too." Thomas looked at me with something like wonder. "How are you this good? After everything I did to you, how can you be this generous?" "I'm not being generous," I said honestly. "I'm being practical. William is here. He's part of this family now. Fighting about money or responsibilities doesn't help him. What helps him is 2 adults who can work together to give him a stable home. We should go to a lawyer. Make everything legal. Make sure if something happens to me, you have full custody rights." He was right, of course. We spent the next week meeting with lawyers, signing papers, making everything official. I became William's legal guardian, with full rights to make decisions about his education, his medical care, his future. The lawyer, a kind woman in her 50s, looked at our situation with barely concealed surprise. "This is unusual," she said carefully. "But if both parties are in agreement, we can certainly make it work." "We're in agreement," I confirmed. When we left her office with the signed documents, Thomas said, "You've given me a gift I don't deserve. You've given William stability. Thank you." "Stop thanking me," I said. "This isn't about you anymore, Thomas. This is about that little boy who deserves adults who put him first." Picking up William from preschool that afternoon, I found him playing in the sandbox with 2 other children. His face was dirt-smudged and happy. When he saw me, he ran over with a picture he'd drawn. "Look, I made this for you." It was a crude drawing of 3 figures, a tall man, a smaller woman, and a tiny child in the middle. Above them, a figure with wings. "That's you and Daddy and me," William explained. "And that's Mama watching from heaven." I had to swallow hard against the lump in my throat. "It's beautiful, William. We'll put it on the refrigerator when we get home." As fall turned to winter, something shifted. The raw grief that had defined those first months began to transform into something else. Not acceptance exactly, but accommodation. We learned to live around the hole Caroline's death had left. William started calling me Grandma, not all the time, but occasionally, when he was excited or needed comfort. The first time he did it, racing into the kitchen after preschool shouting, "Grandma, Grandma, I learned to write my name." I froze. Thomas, setting the table for dinner, froze too. William didn't notice our reactions. He just thrust his paper at me, showing me the wobbly letters that spelled William. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I managed. "You worked so hard on this." After he ran off to play, Thomas said quietly, "He called you Grandma." I heard. Caroline would have been happy about that. She wanted him to have family, real family, not just legal arrangements. The holidays approached, bringing new challenges. Thomas wanted to make Christmas special for William, but I wasn't sure I had the energy for the elaborate celebration we'd had when our children were young. "We'll do something small," I decided. A tree, some presents. Nothing overwhelming. But William had other ideas. At preschool, he'd been learning about Christmas traditions. He came home full of excitement about Santa Claus and reindeer and something called Elf on the Shelf that I'd never heard of. "Can we get a big tree, Grandma, with lights? And can we make cookies for Santa? And leave carrots for the reindeer?" His enthusiasm was infectious. Despite my exhaustion, despite my uncertainty about whether I could manage the physical demands of decorating and baking and preparing for a holiday, I found myself saying yes. Thomas and William picked out the tree together. They came home with a 7-foot monster that barely fit through the door. Decorating it became a family project. Thomas on a ladder hanging lights, William carefully placing ornaments on the lowest branches, me directing operations from the couch where my aching back demanded I rest. We baked cookies. William insisted on making some shaped like dinosaurs in addition to the traditional stars and trees. He decorated each one with painstaking care, using enough frosting to construct an entire gingerbread village. On Christmas Eve, after William went to bed, Thomas and I assembled the modest collection of presents we'd bought. Some books, a dinosaur toy set, new clothes, and a bicycle with training wheels that Thomas would teach him to ride in spring. "This is nice," Thomas said, looking at the tree with its twinkling lights. "This feels like home." "Don't," I warned. "Don't start thinking this means everything's fixed between us." "I'm not. He struggled for words. "I just miss this. Not even us. Specifically, just family. Belonging somewhere." I understood what he meant. For 3 years, he'd been adrift. For 3 years, I'd been alone. Now we were both here, bound together by circumstances and by William, rebuilding something that resembled a family even if it could never be exactly what we'd had before. Christmas morning, William woke at dawn, as children do. His excited shout of "Santa came!" echoed through the house. Thomas and I met in the hallway, both bleary-eyed and smiled at each other despite ourselves. Watching William open his presents, his face illuminated by joy and wonder, something in my chest loosened. This was worth it. All the pain, all the complication, all the difficulty of rebuilding a life at 83 years old. It was worth it for this moment. William was most excited about the dinosaur toys, and completely uninterested in the practical things like clothes. He immediately launched into an elaborate game involving a T-Rex attacking a Triceratops, while Thomas and I drank coffee and watched. Later, after he'd exhausted himself playing, William climbed into my lap. "Grandma." "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think Mama can see us from heaven? Do you think she knows Santa came?" I thought carefully about my answer. "And I think if there's any way for her to see you, she's watching. And I think she's so proud of what a brave, kind boy you are. I miss her," he said simply. "I know. That's okay. You can miss her and still be happy sometimes. Both things can be true." He thought about that, then nodded. "Okay." As winter deepened, Linda finally called. Not me, William. She asked Thomas for his number, and one evening, the phone rang with an unknown California number. William answered, his small voice tentative. "Hello?" I watched from the kitchen as his expression changed from confusion to understanding to something like joy. "Are you my sister?" he asked. "Like, my real sister." I couldn't hear Linda's response, but William's face broke into a smile. "Daddy says you're really smart and you live near the ocean. Is the ocean big?" "I've never seen the ocean." They talked for 20 minutes. When William finally hung up, he announced, "That was my sister Linda. She says maybe I can visit her in the summer and she'll take me to the beach." Thomas and I exchanged glances. It was a start. Linda might not be ready to forgive her father, but she was willing to be a sister to William. That was something. Rebecca called next, also asking to talk to William. She was warmer than Linda, asking him about preschool and his toys, and whether Grandma's cookies were as good as she remembered. "Better," William declared loyally, making me laugh. My daughters were slowly, cautiously, opening their hearts to this little boy who was their half-brother. They were building relationships with him separately from their relationship with Thomas. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Spring came, bringing warmer weather and new challenges. William had a birthday. He turned 5, and Thomas insisted on throwing him a party. We invited his preschool class, 15 tiny humans who descended on our house like a tornado of energy. I made a dinosaur cake. It was lopsided and the frosting was uneven, but William declared it the best cake ever. As William blew out his candles, surrounded by new friends, I looked around at the scene we'd created. Thomas refereeing a game of musical chairs, William laughing as he tried to pin the tail on a dinosaur, other parents chatting politely, asking about our relationship to the birthday boy. "I'm his grandmother," I told them. And it was true, not biologically at first, but in every way that mattered now. That night, after the party guests had gone and William was asleep, Thomas and I sat on the back porch. The sky was clear, stars visible despite the light pollution from the nearby town. Caroline would have loved that party, Thomas said. She always wanted to give William everything, normal childhood things, birthday parties and friends and stability. She did give him those things, I said, by bringing him here, by making sure he had family to catch him when she couldn't anymore. She gave him the greatest gift she could. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, "Margaret, I need to tell you something. I've been going to therapy." I turned to look at him, surprised. "After Caroline died," he continued, "I realized I couldn't keep doing what I'd always done, running from difficult things, making impulsive decisions, hurting people I loved. I found a therapist who specializes in men like me. Men who've made massive mistakes and are trying to figure out how to be better." "That's good, Thomas. She's helping me understand why I left. It wasn't about you. That's the thing I need you to know. It was never about you not being enough. It was about me being terrified of aging, of becoming irrelevant, of facing mortality. I thought if I could start over, I could somehow outrun time." "You can't outrun time," I said softly. "It catches everyone eventually. I know that now, and I know I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back those 3 years, but I can try to be the man I should have been. For William, and, if you'll let me, for you." I looked at him. This man I'd loved for 61 years, who'd broken my heart, who'd come back bearing impossible gifts and unbearable complications. "I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I did before," I said honestly. "I don't know if we can ever be husband and wife again, in the traditional sense. But Thomas, We're in this together now. We're partners in raising William. We're grandparents building a life for a child who needs us. That's not nothing. It's not nothing, he agreed. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the spring peepers in the pond, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside, William slept peacefully, his future uncertain but secure in the knowledge that he was loved. 3 years ago, I watched my husband drive away, thinking my life was over. I spent months in this house alone, grieving what I'd lost. If someone had told me then that I'd end up here, raising a 4-year-old, learning to co-parent with the husband who'd abandoned me, rebuilding a family from broken pieces, I would have thought they were crazy. But life rarely turns out the way we expect. Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes, impossibly, unexpectedly, it's better. I'm 83 years old. My body aches in ways it never did before. I'm exhausted most evenings by 8 o'clock. I'm raising a child in a world that's changed dramatically since my own children were young. But I'm not alone anymore. This house is filled with laughter again. The kitchen smells like fresh cookies. There are toys scattered across the living room floor. I have purpose beyond just existing, beyond just waiting for the days to pass. William calls me Grandma now, without hesitation. He tells me about his day at preschool, shows me his drawings, asks me to read him stories before bed. He's starting to heal, slowly but surely. He still misses his mother. He always will. But he's learning that love doesn't have to end with death. That family can be built in unexpected ways. Last week, he brought home a drawing from school. His teacher had asked the class to draw their family. William drew 4 figures, himself in the middle, Thomas on one side, me on the other, and above us all, a woman with wings and a smile. That's all of us, William explained. My whole family. Looking at that drawing now, stuck to the refrigerator next to his other artwork, I realize he's right. This is our family. Not the one I planned for, not the one I would have chosen, but ours nonetheless. Thomas is learning to be the father he never quite was before, patient and present in ways he couldn't manage when our daughters were young. I'm learning that love can be rebuilt, that forgiveness doesn't always look like forgetting, that family is defined by commitment rather than just biology. And William, sweet, brave William, is learning that even when life breaks your heart, there are people who will help you put it back together. That losing someone doesn't mean losing everything. That home is where people love you, even when it's not the home you started in. Tomorrow, William starts kindergarten. Thomas and I have been preparing him for weeks. New backpack, new lunchbox, new shoes. He's excited and nervous in equal measure. Tonight, I'll read him his favorite story about the little engine that could... I'll tuck him in with Mr. Trunk and his dinosaur blanket. I'll kiss his forehead and tell him I love him. And Thomas will come in after me to do the same, to tell William how proud his mother would be of him. This is our life now. Complicated, imperfect, built from the wreckage of what came before, but it's ours. And for the first time in 3 years, I wake up in the morning with something to look forward to. Not just surviving, but living. Caroline brought William to me because she knew what I know now. That family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about choosing love, even when you have every right to choose anger. It's about building something new from broken pieces and trusting that it can hold. Her husband came back with a mistress and a child, and I never saw what came next. But what came next was this: a second chance, a grandson, a purpose, a family rebuilt from ashes and heartbreak and hope, and somehow, impossibly, that's enough.